Welcome and good afternoon. My name is Commish Orr, and welcome back to something I like to call Stories from the Maelstrom, a recap of the day's games for this past week of real time. It's the fourth day after the All-Star break and the fourth game of the series, a four-game series for each team. And we start in New York, where the Detroit Rockets were facing the New York Swats. Bob Lemon had a rough outing, allowing the Detroit Rockets to bat around in the first. That was helped in part by an error by Wade Boggs. But Bobby Veach hit a bases-loaded triple to kind of cap a 5-run first inning for the Detroit Rockets against Bob Lemon. Lemon settled down after that, though he did allow another unearned run in the second. Thanks to, and this time, an error by Babe Ruth. Meanwhile, New York kind of battled back into this one. They had a leadoff homer from Wade Boggs in the very first inning. And then in the fourth, they scored 4 more runs. There was another error there by Adrian Beltre in that case. And a bases clearing triple from Harold Baines capped the 4-run fourth inning for the New York Swats. They'd score 2 more in the fifth. Wade Boggs hit his second homer of the game. And then Jimmy Fox singled in an RBI, singled in Lou Boudreau for another run to actually put New York up 7-6 at that point. Not to be outdone, though, Detroit bounced right back and scored thanks to Dick Allen's solo shot in the top of the sixth to tie the game at 7. Looked like it might be a battle between these two teams, but unfortunately, early Wynn came in to pitch for the New York Swats, and they're in the top of the 7th inning. The Detroit Bats kind of feasted on him. There was a 2-run homer by Manny Ramirez, another 2-run homer by Adrian Beltre, and an RBI ground out from Bobby Veach to score 5 runs in the 7th. Waite Hoyt would replace early Win, and he wouldn't fare too much better. He allowed 3 runs of his own there, 1 in the 8th and 2 in the 9th, to give Detroit the 15-8 lead, or 15-8 victory in this case. Detroit had 22 hits in this game, and they improved to 16-14, while New York falls to 12-18. A lot of great hitting performances in the Detroit lineup for this one. Dick Allen was 4 for 5 with 2 RBI and 3 runs scored. Kenny Lofton in the leadoff spot was 3 for 6, scored 4 runs. And Bobby Veach was 4 for 6 with 4 RBI himself. And then there were a couple other, Bill Freehand, for example, was 3 for 6 also. On the New York Swats, Wade Boggs was 3 for 5 with those two solo shots. And Lou Boudreau was 3 for 4, but not enough to overcome the poor pitching for New York. New York is one of those teams that doesn't really have a strong bullpen, and in games like this, it kind of really shows itself because they don't really have a strong pitcher to come in to kind of shut things down out of the bullpen against these all-star teams. Or I guess in this case, Detroit's not an all-star team, but made up of great hitters not in the Hall, or great players not in the Hall of Fame. So now we head over to St. Louis, where the Chicago Docs were facing the St. Louis Wizards. And this one was all Carl Hubble. The Chicago hitters just could not get anything going against him. And, Jimmy Rollins did lead off the first inning with a single, but and then Albert Pujols led off the second inning with a single. But that would be, only a couple of hits there. Hubble allowed 4 hits total. Jeff Kent's solo shot kind of broke up the possibility of a shutout. But amazingly, he struck out 14, which is a Baseball Maelstrom record, including the last 6 hitters of the game. Just dominating as the game went on. Hubble improved to 5-0, and his ERA is now 3.10. Meanwhile, the Chicago Docs, Jerry Koosman was pitching for Chicago, and he wasn't doing too bad to start things off, but he ran into some trouble allowed a couple of unearned runs in the third, thanks to some an error of his own for one, and then allowed a couple more runs in the fifth, a couple of RBI doubles there in the fifth, and then in the sixth, things kind of opened up a little bit. Andre Dawson had a solo homer to lead off the inning, and Stan Musial had a 3-run shot later in the sixth. Kent Tekulve came in to pitch 2 scoreless innings, dropping his reliever ERA to .64, one of the best relief ERAs in the game. But St. Louis wins this one 8-1, and they improved to a Maelstrom best 22-8, while Chicago falls to 10-20, the first team with 20 losses. Heading over to Boston, the Oakland Jacks facing off against the Boston Splinters. And this one was a pitcher's duel, early on at least. Jim Cott for the Oakland Jacks facing off against Lefty Gomez for the Boston Splinters. Oakland did score a run there in the third on a Robin Yount RBI double, and Boston responded with a solo shot by Frank Thomas to keep things at 1-1 there going into the 8th inning. That's when Lefty Gomez ran into a little bit of trouble. He allowed 3 straight singles to George Sisler, George Kell, and Robin Yount. The last one of those an RBI single. And then Goose Goslin grounded out to drive in another run to put Oakland up 3-1 before Dennis Eckersley came in to relieve Gomez. Eckersley was able to get out of that inning with a fly out and a ground out. Meanwhile, Jim Cott had 8 strong innings, only allowing 5 hits and 1 run. That 1 run in the 4th inning that I mentioned, the solo shot by Frank Thomas. And then in the 9th, Eckersley kind of blew up a little bit. He did get Joe DiMaggio to ground out on a comebacker there in the 9th inning to lead off the inning. But then Minnie Minoso hit a single. Bill Dickey walked. George Sisler hit an RBI single. Kell grounded into a fielder's choice. Robin Yount singled, and then Goose Goslin hit a 3-run homer to give Oakland 5 runs there in the 9th against Eckersley. Eckersley has actually started the season in the starting rotation, was quickly moved over to the bullpen, and he has not been effective in either role. He's still trying to find his groove a little bit here, past the halfway point of the season. So, meanwhile, Ted Lyons did come in for Oakland, and he did allow a couple of runs. So Boston got a couple runs back in the bottom of the 9th, but not enough as Oakland takes this one 8-3. Jim Cott had been in the bullpen for Oakland. This was his first start of the season after a great performance out of the pen and an all-star appearance. And he showed that he might deserve a spot there in the rotation in this first start, earning his first win. The Oakland Jacks improved to 14-15, while the Boston Splinters fall to 17-12. Finally, we head to Los Angeles, where the Houston Hoots face off against the Los Angeles Dynamos. And once again, for the 3rd straight game, these teams went into extra innings, as Los Angeles got ahead early against Randy Johnson, who allowed 3 homers in 6 innings. Tony Perez hit a solo shot there in the 2nd. Dave Winfield hit a 2-run shot 2 batters later. And then Jackie Robinson hit a 2-run shot of his own there in the 3rd to take a 5-0 lead early on. Don Drysdale was dealing with some tightness in his hamstring and had to come out after just 2 innings. And Don Sutton came in to pitch there in the 3rd for the Dynamos. He took that 5-0 lead into the 5th when Houston was able to score 3 runs to cut that lead down, starting off with a Gary Carter solo homer. Later in the inning, Willie Stargell would hit an RBI double, and Billy Williams would ground out to score the 3rd run. Then in the 7th, Jeff Bagwell hit a 2-run homer to tie things up at 5. there in the 7th inning against Don Sutton. Bagwell to that point was 0 for 2, had grounded into 2 double plays, and walked once before that 2-run homer. That was Bagwell's 9th home run of the season. Meanwhile, as I mentioned, this game went into extra innings, and since this was the 3rd straight extra inning game, both teams were dealing with some tiredness in the bullpen. Don Sutton left after 9 innings and was replaced by Goose Gossage. Meanwhile, Hoyt Wilhelm pitched 1 inning pitched the 7th, a scoreless 7th, and then Rube Marquard came in to pitch starting in the 8th. He pitched 2 scoreless innings, the 8th and the 9th, to get us to extra innings. And as I mentioned, Goose Gossage there struck out Duke Snyder to lead off the 10th, but did allow a single to Ryan Sandberg, struck out Gary Carter, but then walked Hank Aaron, but Mike Schmidt struck out to end the inning. Heading into the bottom of the 10th, Rube Marquard, who had his struggles this season, but was pitching well in this game, did get Johnny Mize to ground out to second there to lead off the inning, but then left one in the zone for Tony Perez to hit his 2nd solo homer of the game to give LA the game winner. This was only the 2nd and 3rd homers of the season for Tony Perez. They came in at a great time. So Los Angeles wins this one 16-14, while Houston fell to 12-18. If we take a look at the standings, we can see that Boston has a narrow lead of 1.5 games there in the American League over Detroit. But still, even New York, who's in last place in the American League, is only 5.5 games out. But they're in the National League. St. Louis is kind of running away with things, as they have been. They are 22-8. They have a 6-game lead on Los Angeles, and Chicago is 12 games back in last place. Coming up, we will have Boston facing off against New York, LA facing off against St. Louis, Detroit and Oakland, and Chicago and Houston in a short 2-game series for each of these teams. So should be something good to watch. Hopefully you enjoy this kind of thing. If you do like this, consider clicking the subscribe button. I do these about once a week. I give an overview of that day's games here in the league. I also do some other videos here or there where I analyze some play-by-play data from the 2022 season. So check that out if you're interested. I'm working on a couple more videos in that series as well. And I do have another idea for another league on the horizon. It's going to take me some time to put it together. And I'm going to continue this one, of course, as we're well underway in the second half of the season here to see what 2 teams are going to go to the World Series here in the Baseball Maelstrom POPs League. Thanks so much for watching, and until next time, have a great evening.